Hey, steady, Colonel. Steady.
Bill, something's happened. Something I just don't understand.
Go on.
You're traveling to another dimension. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
If you were to ask Twilight Zone fans what's the most frightening episode in the series, then It's a Good Life or Living Doll might come up. The actual menace in those cases is very clear. If you dare to think bad thoughts, then little Anthony Fremont will wish you into the cornfield. If you get on Talkie Tina's bad side, then you better watch your back. But there are also episodes where the source of the horror is far more ambiguous. The episode we'll be discussing today, and When the Sky Was Opened, fits that category. As we dive into this chilling tale, we'll see if we can discern why this story works so well in terms of pure horror. And When the Sky Was Opened is episode 11 from season 1. It was directed by Douglas Hayes, and it was loosely adapted by Rod Serling from a 1953 short story by Richard Matheson called Disappearing Act.
Her name, X-20. Her type, an experimental interceptor. Recent history, a crash landing in the Mojave Desert after a 31-hour flight 900 miles into space. Incidental data, the ship with the men who flew her disappeared from the radar screen for 24 hours. But the shrouds that cover mysteries are not always made out of a tarpaulin, as this man will soon find out on the other side of a hospital door.
The episode opens on a rather ominous note. A visibly distressed Colonel Clegg Forbes, as played by Rod Taylor, arrives at a military hospital to visit his friend and co-pilot Major William Gart, as played by Jim Hutton. We learn that the two men recently flew an experimental aircraft, the X-20. What exactly happened during their journey is a mystery. The craft disappeared from radar, the men blacked out, and woke up in a crash landing in the desert. So, obviously there's a lot more to this story.
When did I leave here?
Yeah, well, don't you know?
Look, I don't know anything anymore.
Colonel Forbes questions his friend about his memory of the mission, and Gart confirms they flew off into the unknown and returned from the unknown. But Forbes insists the third man was with them, Colonel Ed Harrington. This is a compelling opening that immediately pulls the viewer right into the story, especially if you're someone who prefers the darker corners of the fifth dimension, like me. Beyond just going missing, this episode tosses out the possibility of people being wiped out of existence.
Look, he was 36 years old. He was my best friend. I'd known him for 15 years, and you'd known him for 5.
In a flashback, we get to see things from Forbes' perspective. One day earlier, the now missing Ed Harrington, as played by Charles Aidman, was laughing it up after returning from their mission. On a first watch, this flashback felt a bit abrupt. We go from a grim setup to this upbeat get-together a day earlier. However, considering just how bleak this episode gets, it may have felt out of place to begin with this otherwise cheery scene. But the flashback does feel all the more foreboding when we already have a hint of what lies ahead.
We'll drop by and see you tomorrow, maybe?
Well, get lost. Who needs you?
Director Douglas Hayes was the perfect choice to helm this story. He'd go on to direct some of the other darker Twilight Zone entries, such as The Howling Man and The After Hours. He also directed one of the more chilling segments of Night Gallery called The Dead Man. In the case of this episode, it's not just the eerie moments that work. Hayes and the performers also bring their A-game during lighter moments as well.
What's it like up there in outer space?
It's like way out.
Unfortunately, the good times don't last long. After getting a profound sense that something's wrong, Harrington confides that he suddenly feels as if he doesn't belong.
Like if I was to let myself go, You'd what? Like I'd disappear.
Trying to dismiss this terrible sensation, Harrington heads to a payphone to call his parents. But a short time later, he's in an even worse state. He claims his parents denied even having a son.
What is it, Clegg? What's it all mean?
As Forbes heads off to order Harrington another drink, he notices a newspaper nearby has changed. Suddenly, Harrington is missing from the photo. Sure enough, Forbes discovers his friend Harrington has vanished. Now, it's one thing to simply hear about Harrington going missing, but when we witness the event firsthand, it's pretty unnerving. And the bizarre disappearance immediately makes you wonder, why is this happening and who will be next? But most notably, This event marks the beginning of Forbes' descent into madness.
You came in here alone.
What are you, a wise guy or something? What? You're crazy! You're crazy!
Later that night, Forbes' girlfriend, Amy, as played by Maxine Cooper, arrives at his hotel room and finds him in a frantic state. Forbes immediately questions her about Ed Harrington, but she has no clue who he's talking about.
Ed, we've been to dinner together. We've been to dances together. Ed, we've double dated Ed.
Clegg, what's the matter with you? What's happened to you?
This scene in a hotel between Forbes and Amy is another highlight. You can't help but feel for Forbes as he totally unravels, and there's nothing anyone can do to help. And that brings us to my favorite moment in the episode, Rod Taylor's powerful monologue.
This is a big, earth-shaking, highly complicated, and fantastically conceived practical joke, isn't it?
Overwhelmed by fear and confusion, Forbes ends up right back at the same bar where things began to spiral out of control. Forbes violently crashing through the door is also memorable in its own right. Interestingly, the script didn't originally call for this dramatic entrance. However, producer Buck Houghton and Rod Serling encouraged the director to find new and unusual ways to do things. Mission accomplished.
I don't know what I did then.
Back in the present, Gart still maintains he has no clue about anyone named Ed Harrington. Soon after, Forbes checks the mirror and notices his reflection is mostly gone. With his time now up, Forbes flees in terror.
Somebody get him! Colonel Forbes, somebody's got to help him right away.
Who?
After Forbes' disappearance, Gart notices the newspaper photograph altered yet again. However, Gart's time is even shorter, as we get a final, horrifying moment when he too fades off into oblivion. But wait, the universe isn't done just yet. Aside from the 3 men who vanished, we also see that the X-20 has been wiped out of existence too.
Once upon a time, there was a man named Harrington, a man named Forbes, a man named Gart. They used to exist, but don't any longer. Someone or something took them somewhere. At least they are no longer a part of the memory of man.
And When the Sky Was Open may be a 25-minute existential crisis, but I love it anyway. We're given a simple yet effective premise. People vanishing from existence for some unknown reason.
Oh, Bill. This is weird.
There's no sinister kid at the heart of this tale, or a murderous doll. But this unknown threat is arguably even more terrifying. And the fact that we're left guessing only adds to the horror.
Oh, that's a good-looking guy in the middle there, but who are the 2 slobs on the sides?
The cast in this episode is top-notch, and really breathe life into this disturbing story. Despite their limited screen time, Charles Haidman and Jim Hutton offer up memorable performances. And once the terror kicks in, they really shined.
Oh, my dear God.
Major, let me help you get into bed. Come ahead, Major.
And then there's the star of the show, acting legend Rod Taylor. Rod Taylor is best known for his role in the 1960 classic The Time Machine. But he also had roles in films such as War Without End, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and he was the voice of Pongo in Disney's 101 Dalmatians. Taylor's final film role was in Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds, where he played a fictionalized version of Winston Churchill.
Breathe in.
This is yet another case of an actor with a singular appearance in Twilight Zone who I wish had featured in even more episodes. Even as Taylor's character grapples with this nightmare, he maintains balance, knowing exactly when to exercise restraint and when to kick in some doors. So, what exactly happened here? Did these men cross some cosmic barrier that no one was meant to cross? Is some alien entity behind this? Or is the universe itself correcting a mistake by removing them from existence? Your guess is as good as mine. But I think the fact that this one's left open to interpretation makes it all the more intriguing. We have seen the concept of individuals vanishing before, most notably in Back to the Future. Now, I'm not sure time travel is at play here, but it's tough to take anything off the table. In the episode, these guys aren't just forgotten about. Things like telegrams and newspapers are altered. The room they were staying in becomes empty, and even the X-20 vanishes. If this isn't a matter of time being altered, then reality itself is somehow being reshaped. Again, I think the fact that so much of this remains unclear works to the advantage of the story. In Mark Scott Zickery's Twilight Zone Companion, there's a quote by Rod Serling which goes as follows: The worst fear of all is the fear of the unknown working on you, which you cannot share with others. I think this deep dive into the unknown is another reason why this episode works. Although Rod Serling adapted this story from Richard Matheson's Disappearing Act, he gave it his own unique spin. Matheson's tale focused on one individual, a down-and-out writer losing everyone in his life as they vanished. But Rod Serling gave us something larger in scope, 3 astronauts facing the prospect of being erased from existence. As Rod Serling himself also noted, the addition of outer space enabled him to spark the imagination of the audience.
We shouldn't have come back from that flight at all. Maybe somebody, something made a mistake and let us get through. We shouldn't have.
Rod Serling's adaptation certainly reflects its time. The idea of launching off into the stars was still new during this era, so general anxiety surrounding space travel is as present here as it was in other episodes, such as Death Ship and Elegy.
Well, what about the ship, Clegg? Did you check her over?
As documented by Martin Grams Jr., the episode was also a product of its time in that Rod Serling named the aircraft the X-20, after the X-20 dynamic soarer, or dinosaur. The X-20 was an experimental craft designed by the U.S. Air Force for a variety of military reasons.
Gotta come back to get us. Somebody up there.
If you're a fan of Lovecraftian madness and deep dives into the unknown, then this one is a must-watch. I'd rate And When the Sky Was Opened 5 out of 5 missing astronauts. That's it for me. As always, feel free to drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts on this episode of Twilight Zone. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit sub, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time in the 5th dimension. Later.